Hi there, I'm Lenore Flower with Cap to Code, and today I'm going to help you understand how to fix what I genuinely think is probably the most annoying part of working in paginated reports. How do we get that date picker to work with your report parameter? So a date picker is really just that user-friendly pop-up calendar that lets you select a date or range. If you're familiar with Power BI Desktop, you're probably able to do this pretty easily. You just create a slicer for a date field and you choose between as your slicer style. Dead simple. It's a little bit more complicated when you're developing a paginated report, and that does not mean that it's not doable, but I think it really helps to know ahead of time when you're tackling establishing a date picker that it's not the most straightforward process. So buckle in, the steps are a little bit involved, but we're going to start with a really straightforward one. When you go into the Query Designer to add in a parameter, what we're going to do is define the date table and the date field. We're going to select range inclusive as the operator, which really just means we're saying, hey, we are going to include the start and end date that the end users are including instead of just grabbing the bit in between them. And we're going to click the parameters boxes, both of them. If you click just one and you don't know to click the other, it's going to assume on your behalf that you want that other one that you didn't click to be a filter, which is a really cool trick in some situations that can be quite useful. But in this case, we want them both to be parameters. Once you've set that up and you've hit OK after you've validated the query, you might think that you're in smooth sailing, and you would be wrong. You test run the report, you think it's all going to be good, and it fails. And you're left sitting there going, well, come on, Microsoft, what gives? I think it helps a lot to understand what happened right after you pressed OK in the dataset properties to be able to get your head around why you get an error in this particular situation. Power BI is doing a lot of work here in the report builder to establish a sort of parameter relay race. And Power BI Report Builder is trying to help you, but when it comes to dates, it falls a bit wide of the mark. Let's go step by step in terms of what it's doing under the hood. It established the from and to date parameters. In addition to that, for both of them, it will have defined a data type. In this case, it did very well. It shows date time, which is exactly what we need for the purposes of our date picker. If it had chosen type text or one of the other options, we wouldn't be able to get that date picker option. Instead, we'd probably be stuck with a very, very long list of individual dates. Nobody has time to scroll through all that. It also created that hidden data set. Side note here, if you don't know what I mean by hidden data set when you're working in reports, right-click on datasets and select Show Hidden Datasets, and you'll see everything that is supporting your parameters. Very helpful to be able to see those. In most cases, that can be a really helpful thing to feed into the parameters, but because we already have underlying date logic in place within Power BI Report Builder, we don't actually need an exhaustive list of possible from and to dates. But what's helpful to know here is one of the other assumptions that Power BI Report Builder made on our behalf is to not only generate that hidden data set, but connect it up into the corresponding parameter and set it automatically to be available values. We're going to clear this out in a minute. I just want you to see how these different pieces are fitting together. Going back to the error, we can tell based on the information in Power BI Report Builder's error that there's some sort of issue with type. And if we dig in a little bit further, we're able to figure out that the DAX query script is actually trying to use formatted date strings. That's that date value right there, gives us that dead giveaway, where the date picker is requiring data type date time. So we have a fundamental disconnect between what the query needs to return values and what the report parameter needs to use to make it possible for us to have that selection in that convenient date picker. So what do? First, we fetch our smelling salts or go for a walk or, just generally avoid throwing your laptop computer out the window. Take a deep breath, don't give up. We require a few more steps to get exactly what we need, but I promise we can fix this, and it's going to be pretty quick. Going back to the beginning, I want to first assure you, because when I was first dealing with this, I assumed that the problem was here in this first step. Most of the time, you're perfectly fine at this stage. The main issue is in the subsequent steps. This, where we had that automatic series of things that happened in that handing over of data from point to point, is where we get into trouble, because we need to make sure that the report parameter is doing data type date stuff, whereas the query is accepting text string stuff. So we're going to make sure that data type date time stays put, and we're going to get rid of that query value hidden data set stuff so that the available values is none. Then we're going to default our values to something useful, whatever that is for your purposes. If you don't have clarity from your end users about how this is going to work, I always just default to equals today, and that can mean that your start and end date is just whatever today's date is, and people can adjust from there. I'm going to show you an alternative in the demo, but that's a perfectly fine starting point. You're going to ditch those hidden data sets because we don't need them, and if you're troubleshooting later on, they're just going to add confusion that you probably don't need during troubleshooting. And then we're going to help out our query by doing a little bit of extra translation and getting the format into data type date string. We do this by just setting up a format expression and defining that date string formatted text to be year, month, day. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but it works. Let me show you it in practice. Here we are in my fancy schmancy date picker demo. We've got no filters or parameters in place. And all we're going to do now that we're setting up our first one is we're going to select our date table, aka dimension, and our date field / hierarchy. And then we're going to choose inclusive range and the first and second parameters. We're going to validate our query, hit OK. Note all the things that just happened very quickly on the screen. Data type date time is good. We get rid of the available values because we're just going to use the date logic that's in place. And then we're going to default to last year this time. I'm going to pause for just a moment. This is a really cool expression, and there's a lot you can do with it. Date add, depending on how you leverage it, can also effectively be date subtract. In this case, we're going to be specifying the time value interval as day. So it's going to be quote D, and then we're going to subtract 365 days, and then we're going to make that reference point at the end today. And what that will mean is every time that this report is run, the from date will be 1 year before today's date, and it'll adjust over time. We'll do a similar thing with the to date. Again, we're making sure that everything's set up, available values is none, and we're going to specify today's date instead. So from a year ago to today is our default range. End users can set it to whatever they want. I'm deleting here the hidden data sets because, again, we don't need an exhaustive list of individual dates. And then we get to the format stage. This is how we're going to help those data type dates feed back into the query while also allowing us to have that date picker. So we're just formatting it into the appropriate text strings. We're doing it for both. So note here, as we're using that exact same logic, that it's year, capital MM for month, day. Don't use lowercase mm, you'll end up with minute. It's not what we're going for. But what we can see here is we have a functional report now. The information fed back into the underlying semantic model, returned the data that we needed, and we have both a from date, which is 365 days from the day that I did this demo, and a to date that is the current date of the demo, with our lovely little date picker. I hope this video makes your next paginated report development process just a little bit easier. My name's Lenore Flower. I love paginated reports, and I work for a company called Cap2Code. If you have any questions, please include them in the comments below. And of course, if you're looking for a Microsoft partner, I hope you'll consider us. Thanks.